Hi there and welcome. I'm Benedette, and in this presentation we'll be looking at positive and negative feedback loops in complex adaptive systems. We'll be examining a couple of examples of both, demonstrating how adaptive capacity and vulnerability occur, and the role of maintaining or undermining resilient systems. Feedback loops in complex adaptive systems occur where an interaction or relationship between actors causes a particular flow of change or disturbance within that particular network. These disturbances can create cycles that either stabilize the existing system or lead to further perturbation and transformation of the system. The way in which two or more factors affect one another can cause them to flourish and lead to transformation, or to decline and stabilize the system. In a positive feedback loop, factor A affects factor B in a way that stimulates or perpetuates the activity and existence of the first factor. A negative feedback loop, on the other hand, is where factor A affects factor B in a way that causes the first factor to diminish or decline, which in turn allows factor B to then thrive again. In this way, a negative feedback loop is generally responsible for keeping stability and preservation of a system. Complex adaptive systems are usually made up of several positive or negative feedback loops, which exist together and create what we see to be the driving or dominant characteristics or behaviors of a particular system. The existence of these multiple feedback loops with their many actors is also what makes a system complex. A feedback loop can reveal where a system may be vulnerable to change and therefore how resilient the system is. It's important to consider whether this resilience can or should be maintained or rather undermined, such as interfering with a maladaptive system that's become resilient, for instance, a community stricken by violence. Anthropogenic influence can be introduced to increase the adaptability of a system and also reduce its vulnerability. In situations where a resilient system is undesirable, that is maladaptive, human intervention is necessary to destabilize it. The following are examples of both socioeconomic and socioecological feedback loops. An example of a positive feedback loop is soil erosion that has occurred in various places across Australia. We'll take a closer look at Darling Downs of Queensland in this instance. Traditionally, this area has been excellent fertile farming country, but has also seen severe soil erosion along with significant downstream effects. Soil erosion has been the result of intensive agricultural practices, including land clearing of native vegetation. The lack of trees has compromised the structure of the land, causing erosion by wind and rain to the point where much of the land is no longer suitable for crops. Water tables have risen along with salt content, making it more difficult for any type of plant to survive. This is evidence of the snowballing effect that is typical of positive feedback loops. A perpetual cycle exists where the effect of one factor, that is deforestation and land clearing, causes more of the second factor, soil erosion. That in turn further compromises the soil and makes it difficult for anything to grow. Other impacts include the damaging of waterways, such as runoff into the sea towards the Great Barrier Reef, where these ecosystems are compromised due to the high levels of pesticides and fertilizers and other nutrients from farming activity, as well as topsoil that gets run off into the waterways. It's important to note that the positive feedback loop doesn't necessarily mean that the interaction is favorable, as this example demonstrates. Rather, the increase of one factor also increases the other, causing a continuous runaway loop. A socioeconomic example of a negative feedback loop is the principle of supply and demand in the energy market. When the supply and technological advances of renewable energy was low, prices for renewables were high. These steep prices started to decline as supply caught up to the demand. The technology became more available and affordable. As demand increases to a point, supply will catch up and prices will drop. Oil prices, on the other hand, will increase initially as the supply of fossil fuels dry up. The demand may initially remain high, meaning the prices will too. Alternative renewable energy supply will cause a decline in demand for traditional fossil fuel energy sources, and so this industry may see a slump in prices. As long as there is no anthropogenic interference with the system, such as subsidies and concessions to the fossil fuel industry, the system will experience synchronization and stability and certain adaptive capacity. We will observe how the supply and demand curve for renewable energy market levels out with less drastic fluctuations over time. At the same time, for the energy market to strengthen its resilience, it may require further diversification and redundancy. That is, diversification of renewable technology. For example, rather than concentrating solely on solar power technology and devices, investment and research should be put into various other forms, such as wind power. In this way, we see that the system has the capacity to self regulate and become resilient by adapting to smaller shocks or disturbances. The system can be susceptible to vulnerability depending on the interference of humans or lack thereof. There are plenty of other examples of positive and negative feedback loops. Climate change with the melting of polar ice caps is a global scale positive feedback loop. The decline in bee populations is another. A negative feedback loop is a self-organizing system of stabilized animal populations in an African game reserve, outside of the impacts of poaching. It's an important task to observe the nature of these feedback loops and how they interact on a larger scale to be able to determine whether maintaining or undermining the resilience of a system could be necessary. In the Darling Downs ecosystem, we observe a case for introducing more connectivity into the current resilient system with its feedback loops that are causing erosion. Thank you for watching this presentation on positive and negative feedback loops and adaptability. I look forward to the discussions this week where we will cover these concepts further with our group. See you all there. Thank you.